Creating your own custom brushes is very easy, and in the next few minutes, we're going to learn how to create a custom brush that scatters. So I'll create a new document, and I want it to be 2500 by 2500 pixels. I want it to be 300 pixels per inch with a white background, and I'll click Create. And the reason that I'm making it that large is because I want to make the brush or define the brush at the size that I would want the largest brush to be. Because if I make a very small brush and then I need it larger, Photoshop would have to resample up that information and the brush might get soft. All right, to make this easy, I'm going to tap the U key and that's going to select my shape tools. I want the custom shape tool selected, but I don't want to draw a custom shape. So from the options bar, I will select pixels. Then from the shape preset picker, I have loaded up the legacy shapes and more in a previous lesson, so I will scroll down to the legacy default shapes and then scroll all the way down to the different shapes. And within that group, there is a shape that looks like this. It is a circle, but it's got a thin stroke on it. I'll select that, and then I'll tap Enter to dismiss the preset picker. I'll tap the D key in order to set my default colors because I want to make my brush black. Then I will click and drag out my shape, holding down the Shift key as I drag to constrain it as a circle. We can see on the background layer, I have not created a shape layer, but instead just created a shape that's made of pixels. Then I'll choose Select All, and then Edit and define Brush Preset. I'll give it a name, in this case, Circle Frame, and click OK. Then on the Layers panel, let's create a new layer, and we'll hide the background layer and choose Select and Deselect. With the brush tool selected, if I just click, well, that will add that as a paint stroke, but it's rather boring, so I'll use Command Z in order to undo that and click on the Brush Panels icon in order to show the brush settings, and I'd also like to see my brush presets, and I'd also like to see my brushes, so I'll select that from the list. We can see the new preset that I just created, but let's use the brush settings in order to make some changes. I'll start with the brush tip shape, and I'm going to decrease the size, maybe down to about 100. And now we can paint, and you can see that I've created kind of a slinky. I can change the spacing if I want to, making it a little bit larger, and paint again. I can also change the angle as well as the roundness of the shape, and again, that will change what the brush looks like. Let's take a look at some of the other options. I'll go ahead and make that round again. Under Shape Dynamics, if I want to vary the shape, I'll increase the size jitter, and I get a very different stroke. I could also change the angle and the roundness jitter, but for now I'll keep it as circle. I can choose to scatter each one of these circles, and I can do so on a single or across both axes, and I get a little bit wider of a stroke with each one of those circles scattered. I can increase the count or jitter the count, but for now, I'll scoot down to Color Dynamics. I have the option to Apply Per Tip enabled, and let's go ahead and change the brightness of this, as well as maybe the saturation, and I'll select a new foreground color, picking maybe a little bit of a light blue. Now, when I do a single stroke, you can see we get variance in the saturation and brightness within that stroke. If I disable the Apply Per Tip, now as I paint one stroke, it will have one setting, and when I release the cursor and paint again, it's going to vary. So as I continue to paint and make new brush strokes, we can see that variance. When you like the brush that you've created, we can save this as a preset by going to the Brushes panel and clicking on the plus icon. I'll call this Circle Frame and then Scatter. If I want to capture the brush size in the preset, I can enable that. I could also enable any tool settings. So if I'd set the blend mode or the opacity, I could capture that. In this case, I won't. And that also toggles off the ability to include the color. But that's all right. I'll click OK, and there's our new scatter brush. Of course, you're not limited to just using the shape layers in order to create a custom brush. You can simply paint in the canvas or scan a texture or use even a photograph to create a brush. Then use the brush settings to customize the brush to meet your needs.